Y'all, I did a thing. I feel like I'm actually uttering those words to my husband quite many times during our marriage, but I did a thing. So a couple of weeks back, I was going through the month of May for the Homemade Dairy Invitational Challenge, where we take a raw gallon of milk and we convert it into something that you would maybe normally buy at the store. And we have done butter and buttermilk last month. We've done yogurt. We have done cream cheese. We did a Chev style cheese. And as I was doing the butter, and if you saw that video, you'll understand that during that video, I was getting a little frustrated, and I think I was hangry and I had to stop and come back. But I was making butter in the food processor, and I'd always done it that way, but I had not done it that often, and I was not a butter making connoisseur. And so I just found the process extremely cumbersome. About a week or week and a half later, I decided to make butter in my KitchenAid mixer, because I know I've seen a lot of people do that and they do it with success. And so I tried that, and it took about 25 minutes to do so. Now, granted, there are a lot of variables in that, right? The amount of cream, the temperature, how old is the cream, right? Is it cultured? Is it not cultured? But it took about 25 minutes. I think it was that night I went online and I was like, I'm doing it. I'm done. And I bought the electric butter churn. And so that is what we have here. I'm going to go through this, demonstrate it. I've only used it, I think, 2 or 3 times so far, but I am so excited about it. I'm so happy with it. I have no affiliation, no relationship, no connection. This is just an honest review of the Wise Man 1 gallon electric butter churn. So again, Wise Man Trading in Supply out of Athens, Alabama. I got with my order, some instructions, some tips, techniques, helpful pieces of information. This is the actual butter churn that is connected to the motor. And then there's like a little hex wrench that you can kind of lock and unlock onto the motor. Now this is the motor. And so it plugs in. There's a very easily definable on-off switch, but this is where the butter churn, paddle kind of goes on. And then there is a flat side, so I gotta get the flat side in properly. There we go. And then I would actually hex lock this in. There's 2 hex locks here, and I gotta make sure that lower one is locked on. And this just screws on to the jar. And so they sent me the 1 gallon glass jar. I already have my cream in here. I separated my cream out yesterday, and then last night I put it in the jar with some buttermilk from the last batch, because I'm keeping a little bit of cultured buttermilk on hand so that I can continue to culture my cream into cultured butter every week. And so it came with the jar, it came with a replacement plastic lid, and it came with the motor and whatnot. We're gonna go ahead and churn this into butter, and you're gonna see how quiet it is and how easy this process is. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is get the stainless steel paddle on. I'm just gonna lock this on. Make sure these are very tight. I think if I were to say, while I'm here, I'll say this. If I were to have one suggestion for improvement, I think having the jar with the replacement plastic lid is great, because then I can just kind of culture my cream in here on the counter with the lid. We're good to go. But for this lid attached to the motor, I actually would really have preferred this to be stainless steel as well and not plastic. This is another one of those replacement plastic lids that's just attached to the motor with some screws and bolts. I think this would have been a lot better if this was stainless steel. But that is my only suggestion and wish at this point. And I don't know why, but every time I do this, I have to smell it. Oh, it smells so good. It smells so good. We're gonna put this on. And so I cultured my cream overnight last night for about 12 or 14 hours. And about 2 or 2.5 hours ago, I took it off of the counter and put it in the fridge because the ideal temperature is really anywhere between 55 and 60 degrees. And so I needed it to cool down a little bit just from being room temp. All right, here we go. I'm also gonna set my timer so you guys can see truly how long this process takes. All right, we ready? To me, it sounds so quiet. I mean, comparatively, if I'm doing either the mixer or even the food processor or even the freeze dryer, or the dehydrator, just as comparisons with different noises that are often going on in this kitchen, this to me is so quiet. I do put my jar on a towel on the counter and I kind of just stay in the kitchen. I don't walk away. I don't really notice that the jar moves a lot with the vibration of the motor, but the towel helps with that. But I still want to stay close and just be careful. And the cream is pretty thick. It thickens up a bit through the culturing process, but it does give it this most amazing, beautiful tang and depth of flavor, especially when you're just eating it on toast or something where you're not actually cooking with the butter. Cultured foods are just like fermented foods. They're all so important. Okay, while this is going, we've only been going for about 1.5 minutes at this point. I'm gonna go ahead and get a large bowl of ice water ready because I wanna be able to rinse my butter, get as much of the buttermilk out as possible, and my tap water is not cold at this time of year. It is just so hot out. So we're 5 minutes in, we'll check it in maybe another 4 or 5 minutes. But I wanted to let you know how I first cultured my cream without having a buttermilk culture to start with. So, the very first time I took my cream and I took a packet of the New England Cheese Making Company's Buttermilk Starter Culture. Now, there's 5 packets in this envelope. One packet will culture approximately 1 to 2 quarts of buttermilk. This is what I forgot to mention, because I bought the 1 gallon electric churn. You never want to fill the jar more than halfway. So it really cultures about a half gallon of cream at a time. They do have, I think it's a 2.5 gallon version, a much larger, much more expensive version, where you can actually culture a lot more cream and churn a lot more cream at the same time. But the 1 gallon was just fine for me. I don't expect to be culturing and churning that much butter until we would eventually get a dairy cow. But I would take 1 packet, mix it with my cream, put it on the counter overnight, and then the next morning it's good to go. And you can actually use it for anything. It doesn't have to be to make butter. You can have cultured buttermilk to make pancakes and waffles and biscuits and whatever else you want to do with it. And it's really delicious. I have been known with some of the byproduct of the butter to just drink the buttermilk. It is so good. And I know some of you are going to know what I'm saying and you're saying hallelujah, and the other half of you are like, what? She does what? You gotta try it. It's so good. So anyway, I start with 1 packet and then I just keep a little buttermilk to culture the next batch of cream to turn into butter the next week. Nope, not yet. But also, you know what I noticed? This kind of came off. As the motor is running and this is vibrating, I think it actually does start to spin off. We just went over 14 minutes. I'm gonna check the churn. Oh yeah, we got butter. We have got butter. Okay, so I'm just gonna very carefully kind of get that off. We don't want to lose any of the gorgeous butter fat. Set it down. And so I have a colander in a really big bowl. We're gonna strain out the butter fat with the buttermilk. And I just kind of move it around. I want to get as much of that milk out as possible. And it helps the butter fat kind of come together into a manageable glob. Okay, and now I'm gonna actually put this in my ice bath, just like this. I want this butter fat to really cool down. It just makes it so much easier to work with. I'm gonna let this sit for just a few minutes and we'll get the buttermilk into some jars. So you might be saying, well, that is a lot of buttermilk. And depending on how you look at it, it very well may be. But what I love to do with this is not just the standard pancakes, waffles, biscuits. Oops. But it is so good as like making kefir or smoothies or homemade popsicles. I just did that last night. I took some leftover fruit in the refrigerator. Anytime we have fruit that's starting to go bad, I kind of just blend it up with whatever I have. Maybe it's buttermilk, maybe it's milk, water, whatever the case, yogurt, whatever just kind of needs to be used up. And then I put it into popsicle molds. And so lately, I have been doing that with some of our buttermilk also, because again, it's a cultured dairy product. It is so good for your gut health. It is loaded with all of the really good bacteria to help fight off the bad things. Clean up this little mess I made. But this will store in the refrigerator. I mean, I've had it store really up to 2 weeks. I haven't had anything go bad. It's just gonna keep culturing. The culturing process doesn't actually stop. It just either slows down or speeds up depending upon the temperature that you're keeping the item in. And so since this will be in the refrigerator, the culturing process will slow down immensely, but it doesn't stop. And so I would say, you know, it's gonna keep going, but as long as it tastes good and you can use it for things, there's no reason to get rid of it. And this is exactly what I will use next week when I make our next round of butter. And so for about a half gallon of cream, I don't know, I'm adding, I probably don't need to add as much as I do, but I add maybe about a 1/4 cup of the cultured buttermilk, shake it up and just leave it on the counter. Okay, now I just made my latte. Like, I've only ever had like 1 sip. Just made my latte. But for you, we're gonna have a little buttermilk. It's a little thick, a little creamy. I really do liken it to kefir, if you're familiar with kefir. And you could absolutely mix in fruit and whatnot and kind of drink it like a kefir. Bottoms up. Oh my gosh. It's so good. It has that little tang, but it's not unbearable by any means. It's so smooth and silky. Oh, delicious. This is actually last week's batch. This is all that's left, but this is what I used yesterday to culture my cream. And you can start to see it separated a bit. You just shake it up. Still delicious. I'm obsessed with smelling it every time. So this is a little bit more cultured, right? Because it's older, but it's still so good. If you were to look into our refrigerator, it's so funny because even this morning, my daughter wanted cereal and she's like, Mom, which one is milk? Where is our milk? Because I've got half-gallon jars of milk. I've got jars of cream. I've got jars of buttermilk. She can't tell what's what. God bless her. Okay, now we're gonna start working with our butter. It's very cold, which is how I prefer to do this. Because otherwise, it's just gonna kind of melt all over your hands. It's actually a little bit frozen to my colander. I'm just gonna start pressing it. You can kind of see some of that milky liquid come out. That is more buttermilk that is trapped in the butter. And so we're just pressing as much as we can. Now, a lot of people will rinse it too under cold water. I'm just so hesitant to do that because that is when my butter literally starts to melt. But I'll just kind of put it in the cold a little bit. I try to work fast and get as much out as possible. The buttermilk in the butter is important to get out because that is what can actually help sour your butter faster. So by getting all of the buttermilk out and just leaving the butter fat, your butter lasts longer. Now, I have not gotten to the point yet where I'm like making so much butter that I'm freezing it. This is really about what I'm making once a week. And we just use it for cooking. And when I say cooking, meaning like topping or bread or something where you can actually taste that gorgeous cultured flavor. If it's something that we're not necessarily gonna taste it and we're baking or cooking in the oven, I just use our regular butter that we get from Azure Standard. But you can already start to see it softening up. It's starting to melt a bit in my hand. Feel like I've got a good amount out. So I've got a glass Pyrex dish right here. I'm just gonna keep it in that. Now I do wanna chill this before I start to use it. I mean, you can start to use it right away, but I prefer to chill it. But it's so simple. The process start to finish, if I'm not talking so much and I'm just going through the steps, maybe 20 minutes, right? About 15 minutes for the churn and then another 5 to get your butter. I'm not salting this. I have not ventured into salting, really because I don't even buy salted butter. I like to salt my food and or my butter at the time of the use because different methods of using the butter require different levels of salting. And so I don't salt my butter, but if I'm having a piece of toast with butter on it, I really love a sprinkle of Redmond real salt on top. I pulled out last week's butter, still got a good hunk left. At some point, if we start getting built up on butter, I am gonna freeze it. So the butter is made for the week and the kitchen is cleaned up, and the process was fun. So I am extremely satisfied with the purchase of my Wise Man Trading electric butter churn, the 1 gallon version. Again, no affiliation, no kickbacks. I just really do like it, and I'm happy that I got it. Even for not having our own dairy cow and only getting about 2 gallons of raw milk a week, it works for us, and it does make the whole process enjoyable. And if nothing else, at least culture your cream before you make butter, no matter how you make your butter. Stay healthy, stay well. I'll see you next time.